Second, there have been more banished to foreign plantations in this man's time than in others. Within these 2 years, several shipfuls of honest and conscientious sufferers have been sent to Jamaica, to which, before they were sent, some had their ears cut, New Jersey, and Barbados, in such crowds and numbers that many have died in transportation, as many also died before in their pinching prisons, so thronged that they had neither room to lie nor sit. Particularly the barbarous usage of a great multitude of them that were sent to Dunotter Castle, when there was no room for them in Edinburgh, it never to be forgotten, which the wildest and rudest of savages would have thought shame of. They were all that long way made to travel on foot, men and women, and some of both sexes very infirm and decrepit through age, and several sick, guarded by bands of soldiers, and then put into old ruinous and rusty house, and shut up under vaults, above 80 in a room, men and women, without air, without ease, without place either to lie or walk, and without any comfort save what they had from heaven, and so straitened for want of refreshment, which they could not have, but at exorbitant prices inconsistent with their poor empty purses, and so suffocated with the smell of the place and of their own excrements, that as several of them died, so it was a wonder of mercy that any of them could outlive that misery. Yet there they remained some months, at a distance from all their friends, being sent thither to that northern corner out of the south and west borders of the country, and some out of London, whose transportation hither, if it were not a part of this tragical story, would seem a merry and ridiculous passage of strangers discovering the ridiculous folly as well as the outrageous fury of their persecutors. For at a private meeting in London, among others, some Scotchmen of very mean figure, some tailors, a shoemaker, a chapman, etc., were taken, and, being found to be Scotchmen, were not only examined at the common courts there, but by Sir Andrew Foster, by express commission from the late King, a little before his death, who threatened them under a strange sort of certification, considering what fell out immediately thereafter, that assuredly they should be sent to Scotland very shortly, if there were not a revolution of the government. But this revolution, following within a few days, retarded it a little. Yet not long thereafter they were sent in a yacht, with a guard of soldiers and a charge of high treason. But, when brought before the Council of Scotland, the amount of all that bustle was a question posed to them under pain of death, whether the king should be king or not. That is, whether they owned his authority or not. Yet, though some of the poor men did own it, they were sent to Dunotter Castle, and thence among the rest banished and transported to New Jersey. In which passage, by reason of their cruel and bad provision, the most part of the ship were cast into a fever, and upwards of 60 died. Yea, even since the former proclamation for this pretended liberty, there are 21 men and 5 women sent to Barbados, against whom nothing can be alleged but matters of mere religion and conscience, which, as it proclaims the notoriousness of these impudent lies, wherewith the proclamations for this liberty are stuffed, so it puts an indelible brand of infamy upon some London merchants, who are said to pretend to some profession of religion, who sent the ship to transport them, thereby to make gain of the merchandise of the Lord's captives. Third, there have been more cruel acts of Parliament enacted in this tyrant's time than the former made all his reign. For in his first Parliament held by Queensberry, Commissioner, not only was there an act for making it treason to refuse the oath of abjuration, confirming all the illegalities of their procedure hereupon before, but an act making it criminal to own the covenant, and another act making it criminal for any to be present at a field meeting, which was only so to preachers before. Yet neither these acts and all the executions following upon them have daunted, nor I hope shall drive them, nor the indemnity and toleration, so generally now applauded, draw them from the duty of owning both these that are so much the more publicly to be avouched, that they are so openly interdicted by wicked and blasphemous tyranny, though for the same they expect from the Scottish Inquisition all the murdering violence that hell and Rome and malignant rage can exert. But to conclude this tragical deduction, as these hints we have heaped together of the kinds and several sorts, the particulars being impossible to be reckoned, of barbarities and arbitrary methods used in carrying on this persecution, demonstrating the reign or rather rage, of these two dominators, under which we have howled these 27 years, to be a complete and habitual tyranny, to discover the inhumanity and illegality of their proceedings, having no other precedent save that of the French conversions or Spanish Inquisition, outdone by many stages in respect of illegality by the Scottish Inquisition, and the practices of the Council of Scotland and Justiciary Court. So I shall shut up all in a summary relation of the common practices and forms of procedure in these courts, which will be useful to understand a little more distinctly, to the end the innocency of sufferers may more clearly appear. Firstly, they can accuse whom they will of what they please, and if by summer citation he will not, may be, because he cannot, compere, if once his name be in their porteous rolls, that is sufficient to render him convict. Secondly, they used also to seize some and shut them up in a prison year and day, without any signification of the cause of their imprisonment. Thirdly, they can pick any man off the street, and if he do not answer their questions, proceed against him to the utmost of severity, as they have taken some among the crowd at executions and imposed upon them the questions. Fourth, they can also go through all the houses of the city as well as the prisons, and examine all families upon the questions of the council's catechism, upon the hazard of their life, if they do not answer to the satisfaction, as has been done in Edinburgh. Fifthly, when any are brought in by seizures, sometimes, as is said before, they let them lie along without any hearing, if they expect they cannot reach them, but if they think they can win them at any way, they hurry themselves in such haste that they can have no time to deliberate upon, and oftentimes have no knowledge or conjecture of the matter of their prosecution. Yea, if they be never so insignificant, they will take diversion from their weightiest affairs to examine and take cognizance of poor things. If they understand, they dare vent or avow any respect to the cause of Christ, and the silliest body will not escape their catechizing about affairs of state, what they think of the authority, etc. Sixthly, if they be kept in prison any space, they take always to pump and discover what can be brought in against them. Yea, sometimes they have exactly observed that device of the Spanish Inquisition, in suborning and sending spies among them under the disguise and show of prisoners, to search out and find out their minds, who will outstrip all in an hypocritical zeal, thereby to extort and draw forth words from the most wary, which may be brought in judgment against them the next day. Seventhly, when prisoners are brought in before them, they have neither libel nor accuser, but must answer concerning things that are to be inquired after, to all questions they are pleased to ask. Eighthly, if at any time they form a sort of libel, they will not restrict themselves to the charges thereof, but examine the person about other things altogether extraneous to the libel. Ninthly, they have frequently suborned witnesses, and have sustained them as witnesses, who either were sent out by themselves as spies and intelligencers, or who palpably were known to delate those against whom they witnessed, out of a pique and prejudice, and yet would not suffer them to be cast for partial counsel. Tenthly, if they suppose a man to be wary and circumspect, and more prudent than forward in the testimony, then they multiply questions, and at first many impertinent interrogations, having no connection with the cause, to try his humor and freedom, that they may know how to deal with him, and renew and reiterate several criminal examinations, that they may know whereof, and find matter wherein to indict him, by endeavoring to confound or entrap or involve him in confessions or contradictions, by wresting his words. 11th, they will admit no time for advice, nor any lawful defense for a delay, but will have them to answer presently, except they have some hopes of their compliance, and find them beginning to stagger and succumb in the testimony. In that case, when a man seeks time to advice, they are animated to a keenness to impose and encourage to an expectation of catching by their snares, which then they contrive and prepare with greater cunning. 12thly, if a man should answer all their questions and clear himself of all things they can allege against him, yet they used to impose some of the oaths that they concluded he would not take, and according to the measure of the tenderness they discovered in him, any man, so they apportioned the oaths to trap him, to the stricter, the smoother oaths, to the laxer, the more odious, that all natural consciences did scar at. 13th, they will not only have their laws obeyed but subscribed, and they reckon not their subjects' obedience secured by the lawmaker's sanction, but the people's handwriting, and think it not sufficient that people transgress no laws, but they also must own the justness of them, and the authority that enacts them, and swear to maintain it. And yet, when some have done this, and cleared themselves by all compliances, they will not discharge them, but under a bond to answer again when called. 14th, they will have their laws to reach not only actions but thoughts, and therefore they require what people think of the bishop's death and of Bothwell insurrection, and whether they own the authority when they can neither prove their disowning of it nor any way offending it. 15th, they will have them to declare their thoughts and hold them convict if they do not answer positively all their captious questions, and if they will not tell what they think of this or that, then they must go as guilty. 16th, if they insist in waiving and will not give categorical answers, then they can extort all and prove what they please by torture. And when they have extorted their thoughts of things, though they be innocent as to all actions their law can charge them with, then they use to hang them when they had done. 17th, they have wheedled men sometimes into confession, either of practices or principles, by promising to favor their ingenuity, and upbraiding them for dissemblers if they would not, and by mock expostulations. Why were they ashamed to give a testimony? And then make them sign their confessions at the council, to bring them in as a witness against them at the criminal court. 18th, yea, not only extrajudicial confession will sustain in their law, but when they have given the public faith, the king's security, the act and oath of council, that their confession shall not militate against them, they have brought it in as witness against them, and given it upon oath, when their former oath and act was produced in open court, in demonstration of their perjury. 19th, when the matter comes to an assize or cognizance of a jury, they use to pack them for their purpose, and pick out such as they listed, who they think will not be bloody enough. 20th, sometimes when the jury hath brought their verdict in favors of the panel, they have made them sit down and resume the cognition of the case again, and threaten them with an assize of error if they did not bring him in guilty. 21st, yea, most frequently the king's advocate used to command them to condemn and bring in the panel guilty under most peremptory certifications of punishment if they should not, so that they needed no juries, but only for the fashion. 22nd, sometimes they have sentenced innocent persons twice, once to have their ears cut and be banished, and after the lopping of the ears, some have been re-examined and sentenced to death and executed. 23rd, they have sentenced some and hanged them both in one day, others early in the morning, both to surprise the persons that were to die, and to prevent spectators of the sight of their cruelty. Others have been kept in suspense till the very day and hour of their execution. 24th, not only have they murdered serious and zealous followers of Christ in taking away their lives, but endeavored to murder their names, and to murder the cause for which they suffered, loading it with all reproaches as sedition, rebellion, etc., which was their peculiar policy, to bring the heads of suffering to points that are most obnoxious to men's censure, and accounted most extrinsic to religion, whereby they leveled their designs against religion, not directly under that notion, but obliquely in the destruction of its professors, under the odium and reproach of enemies to government. 25th, but chiefly they labor to murder the soul, defile the conscience, and consult to cast a man down from his excellency, which is his integrity. That is a Christian's crown, and that they would rather rob him of as anything, either by hectoring or flattering him from the testimony, which they endeavor by proposing many offers, with many threatenings and subtle terms, and pretend a great deal of tenderness, protesting they will be as tender of their blood as of their own soul, which in some sense is true, for they have none at all of their own souls, and purging themselves as Pilate did, and charging it upon their own heads.